Kia ora, welcome to Central News for Friday the 18th of July. I'm Hilary Entwistle. Waikato Regional Council is remaining on track to meet new government water quality related requirements despite a tightened up timeframe for achieving them. This comment from Council Chairperson Paula Southgate follows a report to the Strategy and Policy Committee on the government's newly released National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management 2014. This brought forward the date by which councils had to implement the requirements from 2030 to 2025. Councils are now required to maintain or improve water quality and cannot set an objective below a national bottom line. In Waikato's case, the Crown Iwi Vision and Strategy for the Waikato and Waipa rivers, which sets an even higher water quality. Leading technology will be a critical enabler for Māori development, and marae should be looking to take the lead, delegates were told at a conference in Rotorua. The hui was held by the Bay Plenty Regional Council to focus on rangatiratanga in practice. Strategy General Manager Fiona McTavish says there were many positive aspects to the hui.
So this hui, we talk about it being a koha back to Māori in our region. So it's our gift for Māori in terms of improving their capacity. So there are over 150 people there learning from each other, sharing stories, making connections, networking, and hearing about some really great examples of Māori development, and also how Māori have been successful in their redress with the Crown. So it was a fantastic day, and I think everybody learned something.
A centimetre is all that separated the Tall Blacks from a series win at ASB Arena in Tauranga last night. But a last gasp three-point attempt ruled on the line left the final score 76-75 to South Korea. Trailing 76-73 with 10 seconds remaining, Kirk Penny was called for his toes on the line in what would have sent the match into overtime. The visitors' win now has the three-match series evenly poised at 1-1 heading into tomorrow's game at North Shore Event Centre. Korea were never going to shoot as poorly as they did in the opener in Wellington and went toe-to-toe with the Tall Blacks, crucially controlling the final quarter in a tense tussle in front of a sold-out crowd. Glass fragments found in 2 bottles of the Actavis brand of amoxicillin oral liquid, a frequently prescribed antibiotic often used for treatment in children's ailments, is prompting a nationwide recall of the product. Actavis amoxicillin Actavis powder for oral suspension comes in 125 milligrams per 5 millilitres and 250 milligrams per 5 millilitre quantity bottles. Both sizes are being recalled. The Ministry of Health website says there have been no reports of any harm from the glass being in the bottles. The recall has occurred as a precautionary measure, as the glass fragments found in the bottles appear to have been broken off from the lip of the bottle during manufacturing of the product. The Ministry says amoxicillin is a frequently prescribed antibiotic and is often used for treatment in children for gluea, chest, skin and urinary tract infections. Now for the coastal forecast, West Coast, Raglan, Saturday morning, southeast 15 knots, rising Saturday evening to a southerly 30 knots. High tide is at 3:42 p.m. East Coast, Bay Plenty, easterly 10 knots developing in the morning, rising to southeast 20 knots in the evening. High cloud increasing with late rain. High tide is at 12:47 in the afternoon. Just ahead, TB Free New Zealand in the Waikato. Welcome to Central News on TV Central. The Waikato Regional Council has recently released its annual plan for the 2014-15 period. As part of this, funding for Tuberculosis Free New Zealand has been approved for 1 more year. Anne-Marie spoke with Chairperson Paula Southgate about the funding and the importance of eradicating TB from New Zealand.
Yes, so what we've decided to do is in fact continue collecting the funding on behalf of TB Free New Zealand for TB work in our region. So we've agreed to collect what was asked for, which is around 650,000, to enable them to continue their activities in this region for another year. And then we have asked for a review of their funding, which is going to be carried out over the next few months. In fact, it's underway at the moment, and we should hear something around about that at the end of August. And we'll look at where we go to in the outgoing years from that decision.
Are rates the best way to fund TB Free New Zealand?
Well, for a start, a large amount of people in our region do want us to collect on behalf of TB Free. Those are the people who are benefiting from it. However, Council's not totally decided whether using the rating mechanism is in fact the most efficient way. And so the national review of the funding strategy will inform this. It might be, for example, that collecting industry-based levies might be a better way. But we can't really preempt that until we know what the review discovers. Minister Nathan Guy has given us his assurances that the review will be completed before the long-term plan. So we will be able to decide going forward whether we continue to collect or perhaps a national body steps in and starts to collect. And I have to tell you that this is a debate that all of the regional councils are having, not just us. So we've impressed upon the Minister and Osprey and TB Free New Zealand the need to answer those questions. Is this the most cost efficient and effective way to deliver and fund your programs? So we're waiting with interest the outcome of that review. As I say, that should be in our hands by September.
How big a threat is TB to New Zealand?
Oh, it's a huge threat. It's a huge threat to the economy. We're a primary-based economy in the Waikato, so it's of immense concern to us that TB levels do not rise. At the moment, we're in a good position. We've had a number of years where there's been very little activity around TB. We had a number of affected herds last year, but still at a very low level. And I think this is because we've invested so much into the program that we've got TB down to a very low level. Osprey would like to eradicate TB, that's the goal, and so until we can be certain that TB isn't in the Waikato and won't come back into the Waikato, we need to continue this work.
So long term, will you keep funding it to help with the eradication?
If it's determined that collecting a regional rate is the most cost efficient way, and the people that we are rating are happy for us to rate them, we could consider continuing to collect. But you know, there's a number of decisions there. Firstly, this has got to be demonstrated to be cost effective. Secondly, the people who are deriving the benefit need to be comfortable with us rating for that purpose. So there's a number of conversations around that. We would also like to have more say about where these pest management programs occur so that we can better integrate them with our own pest management programs, because once TB Free leave the Waikato and do less pest control, we're going to have to pick up that pest control to maintain the biodiversity gains that we've gained.
Tell me about the strategic direction and how that's going to affect the annual plan.
I don't think it will affect the annual plan very much, because a lot of the programs are pretty much a more efficient way of doing the business that we've already done. I think what will be more significant is the long-term plan, which is coming up for review. In fact, we have just commenced our council workshops on that, and this will set the direction for a lot longer than just 1 year. The annual plan being basically an annual review of your funding. The long-term plan is more strategic about where do you place your priorities. And so our strategic priorities are very much around clean water, healthy rivers, around harbours, around economic development and around co-governance and those kind of matters. And so that will determine some of the work that comes out in the next 5 years.
2 new Māori seats have been added to the council this year. How's it working out so far?
Well, I believe they're going very well indeed. Look, we're in an era of co-governance, and to be real about co-governance, you've got to have people in the room where you're making decisions. So the 2 Māori representatives, Tipa Mahuta and Timothy Bramley, are working very hard across the region, visiting all their hapu and iwi, so they're out and about a great deal, getting Māori to engage with the issues that we're doing. And that's important because they're going to be more and more co-decision makers.
This year, a regional transport plan is being developed. Is there a possibility of a passenger rail service in the Waikato?
In the short term, probably not. But I do think this is an issue that's still live in the planning. We should create space for it. Last time we looked at it, the cost-benefit ratios were too low, and it was going to be far too expensive to put in place, especially for passenger rail. The logistics around freight rail are better, especially when we get the development of the Ruakura port, for example. And if we can extend the rail line down to Papakura, we get better benefits as well. But this is something that we're going to keep alive in our planning, because definitely it's part of the future. We need to get more freight off the roads and onto rail. And that's just as much about efficiency of freight movement as it is road safety, because the more heavy freight we can get off the roads, the safer the roads will be in the long run as well.
For more information on the Waikato Regional Council annual plan, go to the waikatoregion.gov.nz website. Still to come on Central News, cybersecurity as a profession and your weather for the weekend. Welcome back to Central News. The cybersecurity researchers of Waikato at the university have had international recognition for their programs and research around cybersecurity. The need for highly trained people in this profession is paramount as criminal activity on the internet increases. Anne-Marie spoke with Dr. Ryan Coe, Senior Lecturer at University of Waikato, about the postgraduate program.
Yes, our lab is focusing on returning control of data to users. We realize that there's a lot of tools out there for security professionals and the IT experts, but there is a lack of tools which can help users to maintain or manage their security in the same way as easy as sending a text message or even surfing the web. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to return the control and empower the users so that everyone can become a part of like a cyber civil defense kind of environment. Yeah.
What are the threats facing the average user who, say, checks Facebook, email and maybe a news website?
The threats are usually in this area we call social engineering. Criminals are now doing what they call targeted social engineering. They know that, say, you are a CEO of a company and you probably have some important information. They will send you some kind of an email which gives you what you want. Or if you're a lay person and they just want to make use of your computer, they also send you an email containing something that you want. So, for example, in the recent Boston bombing attack in the US, everybody was trying to look at the video of the attack, right? What happened, and they just were curious. So these criminals actually sent out an email which gives you a link to a video and say, check this out, this is the video. And people click on it, and they were very relieved to see that it became a browser screen with a video running. But while the video was running, they were actually doing scans of your computer through your browser, and they were looking at different loopholes of your computers. So with each loophole, they could plant some small program into your computer so that they can control it right now or at a later time. Ways of controlling it could be in the form of tracking what you type, or it could be even turning on your video camera, without you knowing it, or setting off some recording, or even, to use your computer when you are not using it or when you're using it. As long as you're connected to the internet, you become part of a botnet, which then can be used to do a denial of service on other people. It's just like everyone picking up the phone and calling 111 and taking out the service. So this attacker at somewhere in the world could just easily control your computer. So everyone is vulnerable.
How can the average person stay safe on the internet?
Okay, this actually becomes a kind of a behavioral and a practice habit. When was the last time you changed your password, right? And when was the last time you click on yes when they ask you to update your software? So say the Microsoft updates, right? They would say, oh, do you want to update now? Usually people will not say yes, they will say maybe later or next month. That's usually the root of the cause, because these updates are trying to patch up all these holes that they discover. It's like patching up the broken windows or putting locks into the right doors. Yeah, so the average person should always remember to patch their software and have very good password practices. It will be also a good practice to change your passwords regularly, say every few months, or even, if better, every month, you know. Yeah.
Why is changing passwords so important?
Oh, well, because of the example that I gave just now, when you're surfing the web, sometimes what you see is not exactly what you get. You might get more than that. And they might put some key loggers into your computers, which actually locks down everything that you type. So your passwords, if you're typing in and it's actually recorded, and if you don't change it, they could use this password across different parts of your life. So there was a time when somebody was compromised, his Twitter account was compromised, but that also led to his other things like his Gmail and other things being compromised as well, because most of the time the average user use the same password for everything that they do. So they tend to take down things. For example, the Associated Press the Twitter account was taken down by the Syrian Electronic Army, and then they started posting fake posts about Barack Obama and so on. And yeah, that was just because of the passwords. So hence, we really need to have a practice and a habit of changing the password regularly.
Are there any other common risks we should be aware of?
Yes, there are some other risks. For example, there are scams, or if something is probably too good to be true, it probably is. You know, sometimes you probably are not the guy who won the lucky draw, or there are also most of the malware and the malicious intent stuff tends to stick together with the audience of people who don't want their things to be publicized. So people surfing the naughty websites or gambling websites, they might also be susceptible to it, because when they surf into these places, when the thing is loaded on their browser, they tend to download things that they do not think would be malicious, but they are. Yeah, so they have to be very careful with their surfing patterns online. They also have to log out of their different accounts when they're not using it. And if possible, they could just put maybe a sticky tape over their camera if they're not using it. Yeah.
Coming up next, your weather for the weekend and global travel, how it affects the measles. Welcome back. The number of cases of measles reported in the Waikato DHB area has risen to 106, of which only 4 had received 2 doses of the MMR immunisation. Anne-Marie spoke with Waikato Medical Officer of Health, Anita Bell, and asked, how does global travel affect the spread of measles?
Well, I mean, like any disease nowadays, and if we think back to the pandemic influenza, I mean, it was pretty much all over across the world in about a month. So in terms of measles for New Zealand, most of the cases that we've had, or the outbreaks recently, have probably come from people going away on holiday and then bringing measles back with them into New Zealand. So in general, that would be immunised people who've travelled to places where there are measles outbreaks, and that could be the UK. Or other places in the world, and then returning, maybe not realising that their rash is measles, and then sort of in that continuing infection of others.
What about homeopathic immunisations?
I think what we say to that is that people should probably visit a reputable homeopathic association site, such as the British Homeopathic Association or the Australian Homeopathic Association, and look on their website. What we do know is that those societies do not recognise homeopathic vaccination. They support immunisation to protect people from the disease. They do not support any homeopathic remedies to protect, like immunisation.
What's your advice to the general public over the school holiday break?
Remember and remind yourselves what the signs and symptoms of measles are. If in doubt, then maybe better to isolate for a day, or sometimes some colds only last a day or so. Talk to the GP or health centre if you're unsure, and immunise. I think check your immunisation histories of yourself and your children if you're unsure. If there's no documentation, then begin the immunisations with 2 MMRs
How can they help curb the spread of measles?
I mean, we see it in our outbreak and we see it in others, that the people who get measles are those that are not immunised.
And what are the symptoms that we should be looking out for?
So, particularly if you're unimmunised, it starts with cough, cold, fevers, quite high fevers, runny nose, runny eyes, and then maybe a couple of days later, the macular-papular rash across the body.
What does the macular-papular rash look like?
It's like a patchy rash rather than sort of like a chickenpox rash, which is obviously quite different with pustules.
Are people quite sick with the rash?
They're already sick, and obviously that's a continuation of the sickness, and usually with that quite high fevers at that stage. And one of the things that we do know quite a lot of our measles cases have complained of in their children is quite dehydrated, so reminder to take the fevers down, paracetamol, and also thinking about fluid replacements.
If you have any further questions on measles or the MMR immunisation, contact your local doctor or nurse or phone Healthline on 0800 611 116. Now for the weather for the weekend. Hamilton, your Saturday will have a cloud increasing with late rain and southeasterlies. Your expected high is 13 and an overnight low of 4. The rest of the Waikato, high cloud increasing, rain developing late in the day, freshening southeasterlies there too. Paeroa, 13 and 6 are your expected temperatures. Matamata, 11 and 7. Te Awamutu, 13 and 4. And Tokoroa, 11 and 4. Bay Plenty, Tauranga, your Saturday, high cloud increasing with some late rain. Your expected high is 14 and an overnight low of 7. The rest of the bay, high cloud increasing, late rain, southeasterlies developing, and Te Puke, your expected high is 12 and an overnight low of 8. Hamilton, your Sunday will have rain easing to showers, winds turning to a southwest, 13 your expected high and 3 your overnight low. The rest of the Waikato, rain, heavy falls about the Kaimai range, easing to showers, southeasterlies turning to a southwest, Paeroa 14 and 4, Matamata your expected high is 12 and an overnight low of 4, Te Awamutu 13 and 3, and Tokoroa 12 and 4. Bay of Plenty, your Sunday, Tauranga, rain easing to a few showers, winds turn to a southwest, 15 your expected high and an overnight low of 5 for you, Tauranga. The rest of the bay, rain, some heavy falls in the west, easing to a few showers, southeasterlies turning to a southwest, 13 your expected high and an overnight low of 7 for you, Te Puke. That is Central News for today and this week. We will be following the general election closely, so if you think there is something that is important to your electorate, let us know by either liking us on Facebook or emailing us at news@tvcentral.co.nz. Join me again next week for more stories from the Waikato and the Bay. I'm Hilary Entwistle. I hope you have a lovely evening and a fantastic weekend.
This has been an Alpha Media production, a division of Television Media Group.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.